The evening of November 8, 1960, began like any other. The air was thick with anticipation as Americans awaited the results of one of the most closely contested elections in the nation's history. Richard Nixon, the vice president under Dwight D. Eisenhower, was locked in a fierce battle with the young and charismatic Senator John F. Kennedy from Massachusetts. As the clock ticked past midnight, the results trickled in, with Kennedy narrowly leading in the popular vote. But then, in a stunning reversal, something unexpected happened. A shift in key battleground states, fueled by late-breaking returns, saw Nixon surging ahead in crucial areas, flipping the outcome in his favor. By the early hours of November 9th, the Republican Party had claimed victory, and Richard Nixon stood as the new president-elect of the United States. The nation was stunned. It wasn't the glamorous, telegenic Kennedy who would take the Oval Office. It was the seasoned, battle-tested Nixon. The world held its breath as the implications of this surprising twist began to sink in. Like and subscribe for more. Also, don't forget to hit that notification bell for more history documentaries. Please watch the video till the end, as good interaction would help the performance of the video and the growth of my channel massively. The key factors that led to Nixon's victory. The 1960 presidential election was one of the closest in U.S. history, with Kennedy edging Nixon in the popular vote by only 120,000 votes. The decisive factors that could have tilted this outcome in Nixon's favor would likely have been a combination of strategic moves and shifts in the political landscape. 1. The debates. One of the most famous aspects of the 1960 election was the first-ever televised presidential debates. Kennedy's polished, youthful appearance and confident demeanor won over many voters, particularly those who watched the debates on TV. Nixon, recovering from a recent hospital stay, appeared tired and disheveled. However, if Nixon had been able to command the same level of television charisma that he would later demonstrate in his 1968 campaign, he may have been able to sway the crucial undecided voters. A better performance in these debates could have tipped the scale in his favor. 2. The campaign strategy. Nixon's campaign team was also well organized and experienced, having worked tirelessly to target key demographics. The strong Republican base in the South, combined with Nixon's emphasis on strong anti-communist rhetoric and his reputation as a staunch law and order candidate, might have won over more voters than the more liberal policies of Kennedy. 3. The Catholic question. Kennedy's Catholic faith was a significant point of contention in 1960, with some voters wary of the idea of a Catholic president. Although Kennedy was able to address and diffuse these concerns, Nixon could have capitalized on the unease of certain Protestant voters who may have been hesitant about voting for a Catholic candidate. This, combined with the growing discontent in certain areas of the country, may have helped Nixon secure more of the popular vote. Eisenhower's reaction and America's sentiment. As the former president and Nixon's mentor, Dwight D. Eisenhower would have undoubtedly felt a deep sense of pride in his vice president's success. Nixon had spent 8 years as Eisenhower's right-hand man, and the two had developed a close working relationship. Eisenhower, who had famously referred to Nixon as his man, would likely have felt that the victory was, in some ways, his own as well. For the American people, Nixon's victory would have been a surprising yet reassuring outcome. In contrast to Kennedy's youthful vigor and idealism, Nixon presented a more stable, experienced alternative. For those weary of the uncertainties of the Cold War and domestic tensions, Nixon's calm, methodical approach might have appeared to offer a steady hand at the helm. Nixon's experience and capabilities in 1961. Had Nixon become president in 1961, his administration would have benefited from his extensive political experience. Unlike the young, untested Kennedy, Nixon had spent years honing his foreign policy expertise, particularly in relation to the Soviet Union and communist threats. His background as a former congressman and senator, as well as vice president, would have made him well-equipped to navigate the complex global landscape. However, Nixon's leadership style in 1961 would have differed significantly from the Nixon we would later see in 1968. The experience he gained in the years following 1960, including his involvement in the 1962 midterm elections and the tumult of the 1968 presidential race, would have shaped him into a more forceful and self-assured leader by the end of the decade. A different 1964 election and possible second term. Nixon's first presidential election, assuming he had defeated Kennedy in 1960, would have set the stage for a much different 1964 election. By this time, the country's mood might have shifted towards a desire for stability and pragmatism in the face of Cold War tensions. The Democratic Party, perhaps under the leadership of figures like Lyndon B. Johnson or Hubert Humphrey, would have mounted a serious challenge. However, given Nixon's political experience, his ability to navigate the demands of the presidency, and his strong support from conservative factions, he might have been able to secure a second term in 1964. Nixon's handling of the Vietnam War. One of the most significant events of the 1960s was the escalation of the Vietnam War, a conflict that would dominate U.S. foreign policy throughout the decade. Under President Kennedy, the U.S. increased its military presence in Vietnam. Had Nixon assumed office in 1961, his approach to Vietnam would have likely been more aggressive. Nixon, a staunch anti-communist, might have taken a harder stance earlier, possibly increasing U.S. involvement even sooner than Kennedy did. However, his pragmatism and desire for a peace with honor might have led him to eventually seek a negotiated settlement, as he did in real life during the 1968 campaign. The legacy of Nixon's presidency. Had Nixon succeeded in becoming president in 1961, his legacy would have been shaped by the domestic and international challenges he faced. The Watergate scandal, which would eventually lead to his resignation in 1974, might not have occurred, or at least not in the same form. Nixon's reputation, shaped by his tough stance against communism and his foreign policy expertise, would likely have endured, even if his handling of domestic issues and the political scandals that would later follow had been different. Conclusion: a different history, a changed future. The history of America in the 1960s would have been drastically different had Richard Nixon won the 1960 presidential election. From the escalated Vietnam War to a possibly extended presidency, Nixon's alternative presidency would have had far-reaching consequences. His foreign policy decisions, domestic agenda, and personal evolution would have all shaped the America we know today in unpredictable ways. What do you think? Write your opinion and version of the story in the comments below. Please be polite and kind. If you want to know what would have happened if the Cuban Missile Crisis escalated into a nuclear war, click on the video on the left. Thanks for watching.